All right. Good morning, Ape Scholars. This is a rare for me, day of live stream because we have a noon exam for the first time in a long time. It's been 8 a.m. for as long as I've taught the class. So this is kind of fun. We're going to do some last minute review. My aim today is, can I improve or can I help you improve your FRQ score by a couple points with just 30 minutes of review? Because that's a tall task. I probably won't really be able to answer questions. I also don't have a moderator today to kind of like filter and flag questions that are good ones. So we're going to get right into it. Okay. We are going to, again, try today to get you a couple extra points on the FRQ section. I think it's possible for us to do that. And that's our focus here. Okay. So the first tip I have, you're probably in school right now. So some of you may be watching this in your classes. I don't know, maybe some of you took the morning off to study, or maybe you're on the West Coast and you're not at school yet. Anyway, I would recommend going through the 2021 through 2024 released FRQs. This is because when you go through FRQs and you look at the answer keys, or better yet, you self-quiz yourself or partner quiz, you figure out, what does the scoring guide look like? What types of answers are on it? What types of answers aren't on it? And also, what is their structure like? What depth is required for all these different task verbs? So you review content, but you also review writing. So if you're going to do one thing this morning and you're not already a confident FRQ writer, this is a great use of your time, okay? This slide you may want to take pictures of, or it's slide 3 in the slideshow, which is linked in the video description below. You may want to take a picture of this and really go over these, what I call celery words. A celery word is like a vague, fluffy eco jargon term, eco speak. It's not going to get you any points because it's not scientific. When I say write like a scholar, this is what I'm talking about. We cannot write about polluting things or adding pollution. We have to write about specific pollutants, CO2, SOx, NOx, particulate matter, and going into the atmosphere, soil, or water. So we want to be specific. Harming animals or plants, too vague. We want to talk about population decline, suffocation, infertility, limited photosynthesis, a disruption to the food web because we've lost an organism. So we have to be careful here and make sure that, we're specific. We just can't write about eco-slang. I'm not going to go through all of these. You can read the rest of these. Although I will say chemicals and effect, those are going to be like top eco-slang offenders. You can't write about chemicals. You have to name a chemical. There are so many chemicals. I gave you a list there. There's a bunch of them on the screen that you can use. And then effect. You just can't write about something being affected. I mean, you can, but it will earn you no points. It's not like it's going to take the point away, but it just does nothing for you. It's like celery. You can serve celery with wings or with hummus or with a chickpea burger, but you can't serve celery to your guest on its own. Your guest is going to be like, what is this? I'm not a rabbit, okay? I need something of substance. So your AP reader is the same way. You can't give them celery. You can't serve them the chemicals from fossil fuels are going to affect people and make them sick. A third grader could have written that, It does not take an ape scholar to make that statement. An ape scholar would make a statement like, burning coal can release mercury, especially in the ash. That mercury could make its way into drinking water that a person would then drink and have damage to their central nervous system. Now you're writing like a scholar, okay? So this is one of the most important slides here. I would review this slide before you go into your exam. This is a good question. We're going to practice some FRQs. I mean, I don't have a lot of time to like sit here and wait while you write them, but we are going to go over FRQs for sure. Okay, basic FRQ advice. And I need to get myself a timer going so that I make sure I don't go way too over here because I got to get into school soon. I got to cook my scholars breakfast and study with them. Okay. Speaking of which, My scholars from last year gave me this timer. They know how much I love to, as they say, lock in. But again, lock in's brain rot, narrow your attentional spotlight. So they gave me a timer for timing my tasks and staying focused. So I'm hitting the timer. It's going to be a reminder to stay on track. I'll put it right here where I can see it. And again, thank you to last year's APES scholars. They were great. Okay. Oh, sorry, we skipped that. So these are important tips, right? You don't need a 10 out of 10 on these FRQs. You don't even need an 8 out of 10 to get a passing score. You want to be hitting about 5 out of 10 for a passing FRQ score. And so that means answer those 3 to 4 easiest questions first while you're fresh. Again, if you haven't yet, open the Blue Book application and do the practice APES test that's in there. You'll see how when you pop the FRQs open, you click that little like more button and it expands, and then you have every single question there. Mark the easy ones for review so that you know I'm going to make sure I answer all these first and then circle back to the harder ones. I'd skip the 2 to 3 hardest points on every FRQ and come back to them at the end. The reason is many FRQs are so challenging that very few students earn them. So I grade exams every year. I go down to Cincinnati, or this year I'm going down to Cleveland, and I grade 1,500 to 2,000 exams 7 days straight. That's all I do. And well, actually, that's not true. We have a lot of fun. It's kind of like APES teacher summer camp. And in fact, some of your APES teachers are there and we have a blast. We play games, we go out to eat. It's actually a ton of fun. So you should tell your teachers to sign up to be AP exam readers if they're interested. That's beside the point though. We score thousands of FRQs, and oftentimes there are a couple points in a given FRQ that almost nobody earns because they're just so challenging. And so skip those and save them for last. Come back to them if you have time. Those 2 pieces of advice that you see at the top of the screen, 3 and 4, those are huge pieces of advice that can really elevate your FRQ scores. The other one is be careful on graph reading questions. There's always going to be a couple gimme points related to graphs if you use that line reader in Blue Book. When I say line reader, you click on the top right corner, it says more, you can get what's called a line reader. It's basically a ruler you can move around the screen. And you can use that to line up graphs, horizontally or vertically, and make sure you're getting the right value. And then no naked numbers. You have to give units with your numbers. So you can't say 50. 50 what? 50 birds, 50, centimeters, $50. You need to say 50 meters squared. This was a question from last year's exam. So no naked numbers, give units if you're talking about a graph. The second thing is, or another layer here, is push yourself for an extra layer of detail. So when you describe something, support it with a second layer of detail and connect it back to the prompt. I can't say this enough. This transitions into the next piece of advice. Make sure your answer connects to the prompt. So again, you're using this Blue Book application. Highlight the key phrase in the prompt. A great example, I just had this with my students. Identify a negative consequence, a negative environmental consequence other than the death of non-target wildlife that pesticides have. So many of my students wrote about human health, which is not an environmental consequence, right? It's a human consequence. And so you have to be careful that you answer the question that's in front of you. And that's where highlighting that in Blue Book, so it really sticks out at you, can be really helpful. Final thing I have to say here in FRQs before we look at specific examples. Other than restating or finding, I should say, the variables, hypothesis, or the control group or the question in experimental design FRQ number 1, you're never going to get points for just restating the prompt. So a lot of these questions will have information like in a paragraph above the prompt. If you just quote that prompt and that's it, you don't add any of your own APES knowledge to it, you're not going to get that point. The only exception is when they say, which you'll see in a second, identify, the dependent variable. Then you quote directly from the scientific background of the study because they've given you the dependent variable. There's nothing to add to it, but you have to quote it directly and you have to quote it fully. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. It's a good question. Are you allowed to restate it? You can, but it's a waste of your time. time is so limited and so precious on the FRQ section, you get no points for it. So the only way I'd restate it is if it helps you stay focused on track. So, the question is identify or describe, what was it? It was describe two effects of pesticides on non-target wildlife other than death that can, happen with pesticides. So if you want to say like two effects on non-target wildlife other than death from pesticides that's okay. It's not a great use of time, but if it's really helping you frame the question and stay on track, so you go, okay, it has to be about non-target wildlife, so not the pest, and it has to be other than death. Okay, now I'm going to write about that. If you're a fast typer and that takes you 2 seconds, do it. Go for it. You're not going to get any points for it, and it takes time away from other stuff. Like you could just dive right in and say, pesticides cause infertility because they're endocrine disruptors in some amphibians. Boom, move to the next one. So no points for restating the question. I consider it a waste of time, but if it helps you stay on track, go for it. One more question here. No, you don't need to write in full sentences. It's often helpful on a describe and explain, but you can write broken prose. You can write non-grammatical sentences. You can do bullet points. There's no grammar points. There's no like thesis with supporting bullet points. You're just in and out. 1 to 2 sentences for every question should be plenty. Okay. Experimental design tips for FRQ number 1. We're going to start with FRQ number 1 because this is where, again, my hope is some of you go into this exam in 2.5 hours and you get a point or two that you otherwise would have missed. That's the goal with this last minute live stream. Okay, so what I always tell my students, this is directly out of my slides to my students yesterday. Like this is what we do when we're fine-tuning our FRQ rating skills. When you get that experimental design FRQ, number 1, you're going to see an experiment on FRQ number 1. You read the background to it twice and you read it very carefully. And that's because there's some very easy points if you read carefully, but you have to read carefully, okay? So what you're going to want to do is find the IV and the DV first. Remember, the IV is what I, the scientist, change or manipulate. So you're looking for words like change or select or different. Now, the scientist doesn't always actually manipulate the independent variable, but they might pick a forest where the independent variable has been manipulated by a natural disaster. They might pick a plot of land that has a key difference from another plot of land. So the scientist doesn't always go out and like actually cause the independent variable, but they are selecting or setting up their groups or trials or treatments to get that independent variable different in the two areas. The IV always comes first too. You don't know what the outcome is of your experiment, the data collector to the DV, until you've manipulated the IV. So it often also appears first in the paragraph. Okay, then the DV, the data, the outcome. Look for things like measured or collected or recorded, right? They're usually going to give you words like this to give it away. The table, graph, or figure, if there is one, will also often tell you what did they collect. Units are important to pay attention to here. The other thing is your dependent variable is an amount. I can't stress this enough because so many students know what the dependent variable is in theory, but they can't actually articulate it and say, hey, it's the amount of sunlight, or hey, it's the milliliters of water collected, right? You can't just say it's the water. You can't just say it's the sun. The sun is not a variable. It's a giant ball of gas. A variable is an attribute about the sun that changes. Its intensity, its hours of daylight, its lux. You could measure it, in lux or lumens. So your dependent variable has to have an amount, level, concentration. It has to indicate a variability. It can't just be a thing. You can't just say the sun. You can't just say macroinvertebrates. Okay. Again, quote directly from the background, because if you quote directly from the background, you're probably going to see that word amount or level or concentration in there. All right. This question's been asked a lot, so I do just want to acknowledge it. There's a PDF guide to how to do this. If you search APES exam and you go to the College Board's website, that PDF will be right there. I will also, as soon as this live stream's done, I'll add it to the top of my link tree and I'll add it to the video description down below. But I don't want to take time out of the live stream to do that. The long and short of it is it's very simple. You just do the slash for division, do parentheses for order of operation, do times, the X or the asterisk for multiplication, and you can show your work just all in one line. You don't have to do like division lines and stuff on the on top and on the bottom. Okay, we got to speed up a little bit here to get through things. So if you want a hypothesis template, it's very simple. Increasing, decreasing, or changing the IV will increase or decrease the dV. So you always just want to make a statement about the relationship. I always do this for my students, right? Something's going up, something's going down, or something's going down, something's going up. So when the IV increases or decreases or changes, because sometimes the IV is like what direction our solar panel's facing, something like that. So facing the panels north will increase the electricity production, kilowatt hours per whatever the units are they give you in the background. A question has to end in a question mark, and it's just the statement turned into a question. Will changing the IV in this way affect the dV in this way? Will increasing the amount of dissolved oxygen in a body of water increase the macroinvertebrate species diversity? And so the hypothesis and question are just a statement version and a question version of the same thing. It's ultimately what's the relationship between independent variable and dependent variable. That's all it is. But it's helpful to remember that template of kind of increasing or decreasing. Okay, we got to speed up a little bit. So what I can do is I can give you like 30 seconds here in the chat to try to identify the scientific question for the investigation, to identify a dependent variable, and then let's skip H. Really, I would just be searching right now for the independent variable and the dependent variable. And then we'll show the answer key in just a second, but I don't want to take too much time because we're down to like 12 minutes left. All right. We have a ton of shout outs coming in. Unfortunately, we just don't have a lot of time for this to get these in. So I want to keep this going. But if there is a Mrs. Dischinger, that's pretty wild. I've never heard of a Mrs. Dischinger, the apes legend, but it's almost the same as my first last name, Dischinger. And we have a shout out for Mr. Kirkudis. Okay. Here's a scientific question. Does the soil type affect the amount of runoff? Here's what's wrong with this, Leo. You're really close, but we're not actually measuring soil type. So we have to try again here. Let's put this dV up though here, because this dV, the turbidity of the water, this should work. This should get us a point. So let's go to our next slide and see. First, I want to point out the IV and the dV. So the IV that's manipulated by the scientists is the wheatgrass or the wood chips, or whether it's soil only. So it's basically the ground cover. What is on top of the soil? That's our independent variable. The dependent variable is the amount of water that ran off the surface and was collected. So you could say milliliters of water collected. You could also say appearance or turbidity. And so if we go to the next slide and see our answer key, measuring turbidity, it's not technically on the scoring guide, but turbidity is very similar to water appearance. I'm not sure if they would take the point for turbidity. So this is why it's so important to just quote directly. I know that water running off and being unclear is, a way to get at turbidity. But again, you just want to stick to quoting the background of the paragraph precisely. So if you look at our questions, does the presence of vegetation affect the amount of runoff? Does the presence of soil covering affect the amount of runoff? Does the presence of different amount of materials or different materials affect the amount of runoff? So again, we're not actually looking at the type of soil. It's the same soil in all three plots, but it's the vegetation or the soil covering that's different. So you have to be really, really careful here. Okay, let's move on to another one. Give this one a quick read and then see if you can identify first try to identify the independent and dependent variable here. So even though it's not asking us for it in the question, if you identify the independent and dependent variable, the scientific question is easy because it's what is the effect of the IV on the DV? Here is a student who had a great answer for the last FRQ. So that should be 2 quality points there. All right, we'll do one quick shout out here. This is fun. Axolotls are a really neat creature. I used to take care of axolotls at Hope College, the little school I went to in Michigan. I took care of the animals there in their animal museum, and I had a fondness for the axolotl, so I'm glad there's one named after me. Also, Roseville, Minnesota is somewhere that I have family. It's somewhere my parents are thinking of moving. And so Minnesota is a great state. It's very near and dear to my heart. Okay, so the control group, plot D, pretty easy. Most people are getting that. Independent variable is not exactly location. We need something a little more specific. Dependent variable is the amount of green beans harvested, so that's good. But I'm looking for somebody who has the independent variable correct here. It's not exactly the type of seed. It's more accurate to say it's the GMO type, or it's like the type of green beans being grown. And really, because we have GMOs and unmodified beans, it's more accurate to say the independent variable. Yeah, this is closer. Different types of genetically modified strains. Really, though, I would say that the independent variable is like whether the beans are genetically modified or not. So kind of like the genetic modification of the beans. Okay, let's go on and see our quote. So again, our IV is A, B, C, D, where we have genetically modified versus unmodified beans. Our DV is the amount of green beans harvested. So because we now know our IV and our DV, our scientific question is not too bad, right? Will genetically modified green beans have a higher crop yield than unmodified green beans? Or does genetically modifying green beans affect crop yield? So again, we're always looking at that relationship. What's the relationship between the IV and the DV? Yeah, this is really good to practice. So if you're struggling with these questions, again, Google APES FRQs and look at 21 through 24. There's 8 total sets of FRQs because there's 2 per year. And then FRQ number 1 will always have the experiment in it. So you can always go to that and practice if you need more practice. Okay, this is a slide you might want to take a picture of, or it's slide 15 in the slideshow, which is, again, down in the video description. It's the first link down there. So these are the 4 kind of formulas that you might need to know. This is something that, again, I hope going over this now, 2 hours before your exam, could potentially earn you 2 points or 4 points you might have otherwise missed. So percent change, new minus old over old times 100. You can program these in your calculator if you really want. I would just write them down like 2 or 3 times right before the exam, memorize them in short-term memory, and then put them on your reference sheet. Not your reference sheet, your scratch paper. So your proctor will give you scratch paper. Again, I always teach my students, just like load up 2 to 3 key facts in your head that you're worried about forgetting. Repeat them yourself over and over again right before the exam. And then once you get that scrap paper, transfer them down onto paper so they're out of your short-term memory and you can reference them. I'm not going to go over all these. Again, you can take a picture of this. You can write them down. You can try memorizing them. But this is, yeah, these are really the big 4. We don't see the last one, primary productivity, come up on the FRQ section a lot, but all of these other questions have been on FRQs recently in the past 4 years. The main thing you have to know on FRQs is unit conversion or dimensional analysis. So we're going to practice 2 of those questions in just a minute here. Okay. So again, unit conversion. Here is my recommendation. This slide was for last year. So, writing the units down, your answer on the far right side of your paper, that's still okay. You can still do your calculations on paper, but then you're going to need to type them into Blue Book when you're done. So I'm recommending my students who are really confident doing their math on paper to do it that way. do the math on your scratch paper, get your final answer, but then put your work and your units and your answer into Blue Book. You have to have work and your answer in Blue Book to get any points. The paper is just for scratch paper if you're more comfortable doing it that way. So what I recommend doing is find the answer you need your units to be in the far right side of the paper. So if we do that, we're going to see gallons per year over on the far right side of the paper because it comes right after the word calculate. So it's gallons in the year 2018, gallons per year. Now we're going to take our starting units and put them on the left-hand side of the paper, gallons per person per day. So now we know we need to keep gallons in the numerator because it's in the numerator in the end, but we need to get from one person per day to the whole city of Charlotte per year. So our first step is to do days to years. So multiply days, gallons per day by 365 days per year. Now our days are gone. We can cross those off. And now we need to multiply by the city of Charlotte, which is 841,611 people. They gave you that number earlier in the FRQ. So now we can see our answer here. And what you can do is you can try to practice this question here. So if you're watching this on replay, you could pause the video now and try to do the kilowatt hour conversion one. I don't want to take a ton of time here just sitting here on the live, letting you guys do the math. But I will pause for a minute in case any of you have your calculator out and really want to try to crank this one out. But the people who are saying, oh, we're cooked, there's no way we can do this math. You guys, this math, it is hard to change how good you are at math in 2 hours. But I think people get intimidated by the math. I think they're just like, oh, there's no way I can do this. But just think about it. Like, get your units that you need to end in. So we need gallons per year, right? And then you don't have to necessarily do dimensional analysis. Like if this looks intimidating or confusing, just think, if one Charlotte person uses 90 gallons of water per day, and we want to figure out how many does the whole city use in a year, obviously we're going to need to multiply 90 gallons per day by the total number of residents, right? If one person uses 90, 841,611 people use a way bigger number than 90. So we multiply 90 by that whole population. Now we have a huge number of gallons, but that's the number of gallons that the city of Charlotte uses in one day. If we want to know the gallons they use in a year, we just go multiply one day by 365 days, since there's 365 days in a year. And so this looks intimidating, but every FRQ has one math question that's much easier than the other ones. It's 1 or 2 steps. So I would say take a deep breath when you get the math. And remember, one of the 3 is going to be very approachable. And it's not as hard as it seems. So think through it kind of logically. Try to tell yourself the story of what you want to end up with. And that can help you kind of take away some of the scariness of the math. The third one is usually pretty hard. So if you want to skip one of the 3 math FRQs, I don't think that's the worst decision. It's very doable. This is all multiplication, division, and like, no offense, but like middle school math. It's not calculus or algebra. But yeah, give it a shot. Definitely try the math. If you want to do a few math practice problems, go to AP Classroom or go to AP Central and find FRQ number 3 from 21 through 24, those exam FRQs, and just try a bunch of them right now. You'll be surprised by how much better you can get at the math in a couple hours. There's also a 20-minute review guide video that I have on my YouTube channel. If you just search APES Math Review, it'll come right up. And it's going to go through unit conversion and explain how to think through it. All right. So if we wanted to go through the kilowatt hours question, this one's a little harder, but you can still figure out in one calendar year how many kilowatt hours can be produced. So of course, we're going to have kilowatt hours per year per house, because we're talking about one house here. So if we start with our starting units, there's 4 hours of sunlight in a day. There's 30 panels per house. And then we're going to get rid of panels because one panel produces 300 watts. So we can cross off our panels. Then we need to cross off watts to kilowatts. Someone asked earlier, let's see right here. This is an important one. What basic conversion should I know? Kilo is 1,000. That's about it. You need to know days in a year. Some students don't know there's 365 days in a year. You got to know that one. Again, they expect you to know this 365 days in a year, 7 days in a week, 12 months in a year. So they do expect you to know some of these basic conversion factors. The only other one they really expect you to know is kilo. They do expect you to know that kilo is 1,000 of like your base unit. So 1,000 meters in 1 kilometer, 1,000 watts in 1 kilowatt, 1,000 grams in 1 kilogram. They might expect you to know centimeters. They might expect you to know 100 centimeters in a meter. But they're not going to expect you to know like gallons to liters or something wild. If it is, they'll give it to you. They'll give you the conversion factor. Okay. Let's keep going with this. And then we got to wrap up and I got to head into school. And then, yeah, at the end, you want to go 365 days in a year. And that's going to give you your number of 13,140. What I want to point out here is kilowatt hours is actually a compound unit of the number of hours that an amount of kilowatts are produced. And so kilowatt hours are a weird compound unit. And so this could throw you off if you don't know that. So to get kilowatt hours, you just multiply kilowatts times hours. So a solar panel that receives sun for 4 hours a day and produces a kilowatt of power. Again, energy is a compound unit. It's time multiplied by power. And so a solar panel that produces 1 kilowatt of power, really we should say 300 watts of power, since that's what's in the question, for 4 hours a day, is multiplying those two numbers together and is producing amount of kilowatt hours. If that's freaking you out, just remember, just like AB in algebra is the same as A times B, kWh is the same as kilowatts times hours. The likelihood that you have to do kilowatt hour math is not super high, but it could come up on the FRQ section. All right. Good luck, APES scholars. That's it. That's it for the exam review session today. I hope that something you learned today can improve your FRQ score by a couple points, maybe boost you from that 2 to a 3 or 3 to a 4. You know a lot. You've learned a lot this year. Your teachers have worked really hard to get you ready for this. I know the FRQs are going to be scary when you get there. Students sometimes panic when they open it up. My advice to you when you get to the FRQs is take a deep breath and then answer the questions you're most confident about first. Read each question twice slowly and then highlight the key phrase in the question and ask yourself, am I answering this question? It's really helpful to get some points on the board first. It's like basketball. I love basketball. You want to see that first shot go in. Take a good shot. Get a layup. See the ball go through the net. And then you get a little more confident, right? And then you're like, oh, I'm not going to get 0 out of 10 on all these FRQs. I already got 2 easy points on each one. Now I'm working up towards 5 or 6 or 7 points, okay? So take it slow on the FRQs. Don't panic. Don't just attack them in the order they're given to you. I really don't recommend that. Get the easy points first. Build your confidence. Take your time on the experimental design questions. Remember to quote directly from the background. Take your time on that first math question. It's usually going to be very doable, 1 or 2 steps if you read it carefully and tell yourself the story. It's almost always a story problem. And you can do this. You guys got this. You've learned so much about the environment all year. You know a lot more than you realize. Slow down on those FRQs. Again, take a deep breath, kind of settle your emotions. And also know that this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to get college credit. But I always tell my students, I have 4 goals for you this year. I want you to learn how to think like a mountain and write like a scholar, because those are things you can do for the rest of your life. You can think critically about big picture ideas. You can think long term. You can delay instant gratification for things that you want in your life that require hard work and putting your phone down for 60 or 85 minutes at a time and narrowing your attentional spotlight, focusing on something. Those are skills that are transferable that will give you a better life for the rest of your life. So my goals for my students are always 1, learn how to think like a mountain. 2, learn how to write like a scholar. Use vocabulary, be precise, really mean something specific with what you're saying. Again, it's a transferable skill that can help you live a better life. If my students learn how to think like a mountain and write like a scholar, I'm happy. They've met goals 1 and 2 for AP Environmental Science. My 3rd goal for them is take the exam, challenge yourself with that challenging opportunity to earn college credit. And my 4th goal and my last goal is earn college credit. If you do 1, 2, and 3, I'm still proud of you. You've done great work this year. And I think you're going to have a slightly better life with all of this new knowledge you've learned. Knowledge is what we think with. So when you have new knowledge about the world around you, you're capable of new thoughts that you couldn't have before. I think that in and of itself is valuable. It's awesome. It's really amazing to look at a tree and see it differently because you know something about what it's doing, how it's interacting with the atmosphere. And so knowledge changes you. It changes the thoughts you're capable of. It changes the life that you have. So if you don't pass the APES exam, all it is a missed opportunity for college credit. It doesn't mean that what you learned this year isn't valuable and didn't change your life in a small way. So with all that being said, go into this exam with confidence, knowing it's an opportunity to get college credit, but it's not a statement about your worth as a person or your relationship with this amazing world that we live in and the knowledge that you gained this year. All right, APES Scholars, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for being here and reviewing. I hope something you learned in this review session helps you earn 1 or 2 more points on the FRQ section, gives you a little bit better chance at earning that exam score that you want. But again, remember, it's just an opportunity. It doesn't determine your future. That's all it is, an opportunity for college credit. So as always, you guys know what to do when you go into that exam. Of course, think like a mountain and write like a scholar.